Vesper's lasso whistled through the morning air as she chased the escaped bull through the dusty streets of Thornwick Valley. The beast charged toward the old oak at the town's edge when something impossible stopped her dead in her tracks. A pair of enormous boots dangling from the ancient tree's highest branch. "Sweet mother of pearl," she breathed, tilting her hat back to get a better look. A giant of a man hung upside down, massive frame swaying gently in the breeze, his long auburn hair cascaded toward the ground like a waterfall of copper, and even inverted, she could see he was easily 7 feet tall. His clothes were torn, his face was flushed red from the blood rushing to his head, but his eyes, those startling green eyes, were alert and focused entirely on her. "Ma'am," he called down in a voice like distant thunder, "I don't suppose you'd consider helping a fellow out of this predicament?" Vesper's heart hammered against her ribs. In all her 23 years riding the ranges around Thornwick Valley, she'd never seen anything like him. The escaped bull forgotten, she dismounted her mare Whiskey and approached the tree. "How in tarnation did you get yourself strung up like a side of beef?" she asked, craning her neck to look at him properly. The giant managed a crooked smile. That made her stomach flip. "That's a tale worth telling, but I reckon I'd prefer to tell it right side up, if you don't mind." Vesper studied the rope wrapped around his ankles. It was expertly knotted. Whoever had done this knew their business. "Who did this to you?" "The Grimsby brothers caught me sleeping rough near their property line. Seems they took exception to my ... size." His voice carried no bitterness, only a gentle humor that surprised her. "They figured hanging me up like Christmas ornaments would teach me a lesson about trespassing. It's those yellow-bellied cowards," Vesper spat. The Grimsby brothers were known throughout the valley for their cruelty, but this exceeded even their usual nastiness. "What's your name, stranger?" "Caspian Ironwood, ma'am. And you'd be?" "Vesper Nightingale." She pulled her hunting knife from her boot. "Hold still, Caspian Ironwood. I'm going to cut you down." "Wait," Caspian called out urgently. "Before you do that, I need to warn you about something." Vesper paused, knife halfway to the rope. "What kind of warning?" "When I fall land, I will fall hard. I'm going to land right where you're standing. I don't want to hurt you." The simple consideration in his words, the way he worried about her safety, even while hanging helpless and humiliated, sent warmth spreading through her chest. Most men, she knew, would have been cursing and demanding rescue without a thought for anyone else. "I can handle myself," she said softly, stepping back. "But thank you for the warning." As she sawed through the thick rope, Caspian spoke again. "Miss Nightingale, I want you to know, even hanging here like a bat, this is the best morning I've had in months. Just seeing your face, ... double quotes, seeming to search for words, well, it makes a man believe in angels again." The rope snapped. Caspian crashed to the earth with a thunderous impact that shook the ground beneath Vesper's boots. Dust billowed around his massive form as he groaned and rolled onto his side. But even sprawled in the dirt, even after hours of humiliation, he looked up at her with those incredible green eyes and smiled. "Thank you, Angel," he whispered, and in that moment, as morning sunlight filtered through the oak leaves and painted golden patterns across his rugged face, Vesper Nightingale felt something shift inside her heart, something wild and wonderful and completely unexpected. Vesper knelt beside Caspian as he struggled to sit up, his massive frame dwarfing her even while he remained on the ground. Blood had pooled in his head during the night, leaving him dizzy and disoriented. "Easy there, big fellow," she murmured, steadying him with her hands on his shoulders. The contact sent electricity shooting through her fingertips. The shoulders were broad as a barn door, solid muscle beneath the torn fabric of his shirt. "The world won't stop spinning," Caspian admitted, blinking slowly. "How long do you reckon I was hanging there?" Vesper examined the rope burns around his ankles, her touch gentle as a whisper. "By the look of these wounds, I'd say all night. Maybe longer." Anger flared in her chest again at the thought of the Grimsby brothers leaving him to suffer. Caspian tried to stand, but swayed dangerously. Without hesitation, Vesper slipped under his arm, becoming a human crutch for the giant. The top of her head barely reached his shoulder, but she braced herself and took his weight. "You don't have to," he began. "Hush," she interrupted. "My cabin's just over that ridge. You need water and rest." As they walked, Caspian leaning heavily on her slight frame, Vesper marveled at how he tried to minimize his weight against her. Every step was carefully measured, considerate. Most men his size would have bulldozed forward without thought. But Caspian moved like he was afraid of breaking something precious. "Tell me about yourself, Vesper Nightingale," he said, as they climbed the dusty path toward her homestead. The voice had regained some of its strength, that deep rumble that seemed to resonate in her bones. "Not much to tell," she replied, though his genuine interest warmed her. "I run cattle on a small spread, do some horse breaking, survive however I can. Been on my own since P.A. died, 3 winters back, all alone out here." Concern colored his tone. "That's dangerous country for anyone, let alone ... let alone a woman." Vesper's voice carried a challenging edge. "Let alone someone I care about," Caspian corrected quietly. The simple honesty of his words stopped her in her tracks. They'd known each other less than an hour, but something in his tone told her he meant it completely. She looked up into his face, studying the strong jaw covered in several days of stubble. The laugh lines around those remarkable green eyes, the genuine warmth in his expression. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I know enough," he replied. "I know you stopped chasing that bull to help a stranger. I know you risked yourself to cut me down when you could have just ridden away. I know your hands are gentle when you touch these rope burns, and I know you're strong enough to carry a giant when he needs carrying." Heat flooded Vesper's cheeks. "Caspian, I know your voice sounds like music when you say my name," he continued, reaching up to touch her face with fingers surprisingly gentle for their size. "And I know that when you looked at me hanging in that tree, you didn't see a freak or a monster. You saw a man who needed help." His thumb traced along her cheekbone, and Vesper felt her knees go weak. No man had ever touched her with such reverence, such careful tenderness. "What are you doing to me?" she breathed. "Same thing you're doing." "To me, I reckon," Caspian murmured. "Turning my world upside down, though I suppose mine was already that way when you found me." Despite everything, Vesper laughed. The sound bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her, pure and joyful. Caspian's answering smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. They reached her cabin as the sun climbed higher, painting the rough-hewn logs golden. It was a modest place, but clean and well-maintained. Vesper helped him to the porch, steps where he could rest while she drew water from the well. As she worked the pump handle, she felt his eyes on her and found herself moving with unconscious grace, aware of his attention in a way that should have made her uncomfortable but somehow felt perfect instead. "Vesper," Caspian called softly. She turned, water bucket in hand. "Thank you," he said. "It's not just for cutting me down, but for seeing me, really seeing me." In that moment, as morning light caught the copper threads in his hair and highlighted the sincerity in his green eyes, Vesper knew, with absolute certainty, that her life had just changed forever. Vesper brought Caspian inside her cabin, marveling at how he had to duck through doorways built for normal-sized men. Everything about her home seemed to shrink in his presence, yet somehow it felt more complete with him filling the space. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to her sturdiest chair. "Let me tend those rope burns properly." She gathered supplies clean. Cloth, salve her grandmother had taught her to make from willow bark, and honey Vesper found herself stealing glances at him. Even seated, Caspian dominated the room. His long legs stretched nearly to the fireplace, his broad shoulders filled. The entire back of the chair. "You're staring," he observed with gentle amusement. "Never seen a man quite like you," she admitted, kneeling to examine his injured ankles. "Where'd he come from? Caspian Ironwood?" His expression grew distant. "Nowhere, really. Everywhere. I've been traveling for, most of my life. Running." "From something?" Vesper asked as she cleaned the angry rope marks. Caspian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried old pain. "Running to something, I hope. Been searching for a place where a man like me might belong." "Do you mean a man like you?" "Look at me, Vesper." He gestured to his massive frame. "I'm 7.5 feet tall, built like a mountain. Most folks take one look and see either a freak to be gawked at or a monster to be feared." Vesper's hand stilled on his ankle. "What do I see?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," he said softly. You looked at me hanging from that tree like I was just, a man who needed help. She resumed her gentle ministrations, wrapping clean bandages around his wounds. That's because that's exactly what you were. The Grimsby brothers didn't see it that way. They took one look at me and decided I was trouble. Been that way everywhere I go. His voice carried resignation born of years of rejection. Can't blame them, I suppose. I understand why people are afraid. I'm not afraid, Vesper said firmly, tying off the bandage. You should be. The words came out rougher than he intended. I'm not like other men, Vesper. There are things about me like what? She moved to clean the cuts on his hands where the rope had chafed his palms as he'd tried to free himself. Caspian studied her face, seeming to weigh whether to trust her with whatever secret he carried. My strength, it's not natural. I can lift things no man should be able to lift. I can hear sounds from miles away, see in darkness like it was daylight. And when I get angry, he trailed off, looking away. When you get angry? What? Things break, he said simply. Sometimes people get hurt, even when I don't mean for it to happen. Vesper finished bandaging his hands and sat back on her heels. Is that why you were sleeping rough? Why you keep moving? Partly, he met her eyes again. But also because I've been searching for something I wasn't sure existed. What's that? Someone who could look past what I am to see who I am? His voice dropped too barely above a whisper. Someone who might care about me despite everything. Vulnerability in his words made Vesper's heart ache. She could see the loneliness he carried, the weight of years spent hiding his true nature, of being feared and rejected wherever he went. Caspian, she said, reaching up to touch his face. Whatever you are, whatever you can do, it doesn't frighten me. It should, he repeated, but his hand came up to cover hers against his cheek. Well, it doesn't. She smiled at him, fierce and determined. Handled wild mustangs and wounded wolves. I've faced down cattle thieves and survived blizzards that would kill most folks. You think I'm going to be scared of a gentle giant who worries about hurting people? Gentle giant, he repeated with a rueful laugh. If only you knew. Then tell me, Vesper challenged. Stop dancing around whatever secret you're carrying and just tell me. Caspian looked at her for a long moment, this small, fierce woman who had already turned his world upside down. In her eyes, he saw something he'd never dared hope, for acceptance without conditions, courage without reservation. My mother, he said finally, wasn't entirely human. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Vesper's hand remained steady against his cheek, her gaze never wavering from his face. What was she? She asked quietly. Something old. Something from the deep mountains, before settlers came to this land. His green eyes seemed to glow in the cabin's dim light. Something that should have stayed hidden in the wild places of the world. My mother came from the ancient peaks beyond. The northern range, Caspian continued, his voice taking on the cadence of old stories told by firelight. The Cherokee called her people the Nunahitha, stone-born ones. Spirits of the mountains who sometimes walked among humans. Vesper's hand remained steady against his cheek, her touch anchoring him as he revealed secrets he'd never spoken aloud. That's why you're so large, so strong, among other things. He turned his head to press a gentle kiss to her palm. My father was Humana Trapper, who got lost in a blizzard. She saved his life, and they fell in love. For a time, they were happy. What happened to them? Pain flickered across Caspian's features. When I was born, the other Nunhe said I was an abomination too human to belong with them, too otherworldly to live among men. They drove my parents out. My father died when I was 12, and my mother, she faded. That's what happens when the stone-born ones stay too long in the lowlands. They lose their connection to the mountains and simply, disappear, Vesper felt. Tears prick her eyes at the sorrow in his voice. She'd thought herself alone in the world, but at least she'd had her father's love for 20 years. Caspian had been truly alone since boyhood. I've been wandering ever since, he continued. Too dangerous to stay anywhere long. When people see what I can do, they either want to use me or destroy me. Show me, Vesper said quietly. What's your strength? Show me what you can do. Caspian shook his head. Vesper, I don't want to frighten you. You won't. She stood and moved to her fireplace, where a cast-iron pot hung over cold ashes. The pot was so heavy it usually took her considerable effort to lift it empty. Can you move this with one hand? Reluctantly. Caspian rose and approached the fireplace. His massive frame made the cabin feel even smaller. With casual ease, he lifted the heavy pot with his fingertips, holding it steady as a feather. That's not all, is it? Vesper asked, studying his face. No, he set the pot down and listened, intently to something she couldn't hear. There are riders coming. 3 men moving fast. They'll be here in about 10 minutes. I don't hear anything, Vesper said, stepping to the window. You will in a few minutes. Caspian's expression grew. Grim. It's the Grimsby brothers. They must have tracked us here. Fear flashed through Vesper, not for herself, but for him. The Grimsby brothers were cruel men, but they weren't stupid. If they'd come after Caspian again, they'd come prepared. They'll have guns, she said. Probably more men than just the 3 brothers. I know. Caspian's voice was steady, resigned. I should go. I won't bring danger to your door. Like hell you will. Vesper moved to her gun cabinet, pulling out her father's Winchester rifle. This is my home, and you're my guest. Nobody runs. Me off my own land. Vesper, you don't understand. If I fight them, if I let the mountain blood take over, I might hurt you too. I might not be able to control it. She turned to face him, rifle in hand, her eyes blazing with determination. Then don't let it take over. Control it. It's not that simple, isn't it? She stepped closer to him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his massive frame. You controlled it when you were hanging from that tree. You controlled it when you were in pain and angry and humiliated. You controlled it because you didn't want to frighten me. That was different. How? Because... He looked down at her. This small, fierce woman who stood ready to fight beside him. Because I was thinking about you. And keep thinking about me, Vesper said softly. When the darkness rises, when the mountain blood calls for violence, think about me. Think about this moment, right here, right now. She reached up and pulled his head down until their faces were inches apart. Think about the fact that someone finally sees you for who you really are. Someone who isn't afraid of your strength, or your heritage, or your past. Vesper, he breathed, his hands coming up to frame her face. Think about the fact that I'm falling in love with you, Caspian. Ironwood, she whispered against his lips. All of you. The human parts, and the new Nahi parts, and everything in between. Before he could respond, she kissed him. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, a kiss that tasted like hope and felt like coming home. When they broke apart, Caspian's green eyes were bright with unshed tears. I love you too, he said, the words torn from somewhere deep in his chest. God help me, I love you too. The sound of hoofbeats reached them then, just as Caspian had predicted. Vesper stepped back, checking her rifle's chamber. Well then, she said with a fierce smile. Let's show these bastards what happens when they mess with our family. The Grimsby brothers arrived with 5 additional men, all armed and spoiling for a fight. Luther Grimsby, the eldest and meanest of the 3, dismounted with a shotgun in his hands and murder in his eyes. We know you're in there, freak, he shouted toward the cabin. Come out peaceful-like, and we might let the little lady live. Vesper positioned herself at the window while Caspian pressed against the wall beside the door. She could feel the tension radiating from him, the careful control he maintained over the otherworldly power in his blood. Think about me, she whispered, and saw his shoulders relax slightly. You've got 1 minute, Luther called. Then we burn you out. It's like hell you will, Vesper muttered, taking aim through the window. She'd been shooting since she was 10 years old, and her father had trained her well. Her first shot took Luther's hat clean off his head. The second shattered a whiskey bottle in Jeremiah Grimsby's hand. That's your warning, she shouted. Next one won't miss. The men scrambled for cover behind their horses in the well, returning fire that splintered the wooden walls around the window. Vesper ducked, then moved to another position, keeping them guessing. There's too many of them, Caspian said grimly. They'll overwhelm us eventually. Not if we take the fight to them, Vesper replied, reloading. You still worried about controlling your strength? That's good. That means you're still thinking. She smiled at him fiercely. Time to show these boys what a real mountain man can do. Caspian took a deep breath, then kicked open the cabin door with such force it flew off its hinges. The sound was like thunder, and several of the attackers actually stepped back in fear. Luther Grimsby's eyes widened as Caspian emerged into the morning sunlight, his massive frame seeming to grow even larger in the open air. Jesus Christ, one of the hired guns whispered. Look at the size of him. He's just a man. Luther snarled, raising his shotgun. Big men die, same as little ones. But when Luther pulled the trigger, Caspian moved with inhuman speed. He snatched a fence post from Vesper's corral post that would have taken 2 normal men to lift and used it as a shield. The shotgun blast splintered harmlessly against the wood. Then Caspian threw the post like a spear. It struck the ground, between Luther and his horse, with such force that both man and animal were knocked sprawling. The post buried itself 3 feet deep in the hard-packed earth. Sweet Mary and Joseph, breathed one of the hired guns. That ain't natural. He's a demon. Jeremiah Grimsby screamed. A goddamn demon. Fear began to spread through their ranks. These were hard men, accustomed to violence, but they'd never seen anything like Caspian's display of raw power. 2 of the hired guns mounted their horses and rode off without another word. Stand your ground, Luther roared, struggling to his feet. He's just one man. But Caspian was advancing now, moving with purposeful strides toward the remaining attackers. Vesper provided covering fire from the cabin, her shots keeping the men pinned down while Caspian closed the distance. Mordecai Grimsby, the youngest of the brothers, tried to circle around behind Caspian. Big mistake. Caspian heard him coming, that supernatural hearing serving him well and spun with fluid grace. His massive hand closed around Mordecai's wrist, and the man's gun fell from nerveless fingers. Please, Mordecai whimpered. Don't kill me. Caspian looked down at him, and for a moment Vesper saw something wild and dangerous flicker in his green eyes. The mountain blood was calling, urging him toward violence. But then their eyes met across the dusty yard, and she saw him remember her words. I don't kill unless I have to, Caspian said quietly, releasing Mordecai with a shove that sent him sprawling. But if you or your brothers ever come near Miss Nightingale again, I'll forget my manners. Luther, desperate now, made one last play. He pulled a hidden pistol and aimed it not at Caspian, but at Vesper in the cabin window. I'll kill the bitch, he screamed. Everything seemed to slow. Vesper saw the guns swinging toward her, saw Luther's finger tightening on the trigger. He tried to move, but knew she wouldn't be fast enough. Then Caspian was there. He moved faster than thought, faster than fear. One moment he was 20 feet away, the next his massive hand was crushing Luther's wrist. The gun discharged harmlessly into the air as Caspian lifted the screaming man completely off the ground. You don't touch her. Each word was punctuated by barely controlled fury. Caspian's eyes blazed with an inner light that was definitely not human. I'm sorry, Luther sobbed. I'm sorry. Please don't kill me. Caspian held him there for a long moment, struggling with the darkness that wanted to tear Luther apart. Now then. He looked at Vesper again, standing safe in her doorway, and the wild light in his eyes faded. He dropped Luther, who crumpled to the ground and crawled away whimpering. If I see any of you on Miss Nightingale's land again, Caspian said quietly, I won't be so gentle. The remaining Grimsby brothers and their hired guns fled like their pants were on fire, leaving behind dropped weapons and wounded pride. Caspian stood in the settling dust, his massive chest heaving, his hands shaking slightly from the effort of maintaining control. Vesper ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist and holding him tight. You did it, she whispered against his chest.
You controlled it. You protected us both. I almost lost myself, he admitted, his arms coming around her. Out.
When he aimed at you, I almost became the monster they think I am. But you didn't, Vesper said firmly. You chose who you wanted to be. In the days that followed the confrontation with the Grimsby brothers, Vesper and Caspian fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. He helped repair the damage to her cabin, his incredible strength making quick work of tasks that would have taken her weeks. She tended his remaining injuries and cooked meals that could satisfy his enormous appetite. but it was the quiet moments between them that truly mattered. Conversations by the firelight that stretched deep into the night, gentle touches that spoke of growing intimacy, and a trust that deepened with each passing hour. "Tell me about your dreams," Vesper said one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sun paint the mountains gold and crimson. Caspian was whittling a skill his father had taught him long ago. In his massive hands, the delicate work seemed impossible, yet he carved with surprising grace. "I used to dream about finding a place to belong," he said thoughtfully, "somewhere I could be useful instead of feared. And now—" He looked at her, this small, fierce woman who had changed everything. "Now I dream about building a life with you, about waking up every morning to your face and falling asleep every night to the sound of your breathing." Leaded Vesper's cheeks. "Caspian, I know it's foolish," he continued, setting aside his carving. "No. I know I'm asking you to share a life with someone who's part human, part something else entirely. Someone who brings danger just by existing. You think I care about any of that?" Vesper shifted closer to him on the porch step, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You think I care that you're different? You should." His voice carried old pain. "I'll never be fully accepted anywhere. People will always stare, always whisper. Children will run from me, and their parents will cross themselves when I pass. Let them," Vesper said fiercely. "Let them stare and whisper and run. I know who you are, Caspian Ironwood. I know your heart." She took his massive hands in her small ones, marveling at how gentle his touch always was, despite his incredible strength. "I know you risk your life to save strangers. I know you worry about crushing flowers when you walk through a meadow. I know you carved this little bird for me because you noticed I like to watch them in the morning." She held up the delicate wooden sparrow he'd been working on, every feather carved with loving detail. "I know you'd rather die than hurt someone. Innocent, and I know you love me enough to leave if you thought it would keep me safe." "I do love you," he said quietly. "It's more than I ever thought possible." "Then stay," Vesper whispered. "Stay and build that life with me. Help me run the ranch, be my partner in everything. Let me love all of you, the human parts, and the Nunahai heritage and everything that makes you who you are." Caspian searched her face, looking for any sign of doubt or fear. Instead, he found only love, pure, unconditional, fierce as a wildfire, and steady as stone. "The town won't accept us," he warned. "They'll make life difficult. Then we'll make our own acceptance." Vesper smiled at him with such radiant joy that it took his breath away. "We'll show them that love is stronger than fear, that kindness matters more than appearance, that a good heart trumps everything else. And if they never accept me, then that's their loss," she said simply. "Because I've already accepted you completely." Caspian pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him despite their difference in size. She was so small, so delicate, yet she had the courage of a lioness and the strength to carry them both when he faltered. "I've been alone so long," he murmured against her hair. "I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone believe in me." "You're not alone anymore," Vesper promised. "You'll never be alone again." They sat together as the sun set behind the mountains, holding each other and planning their future. They would expand the ranch, breed horses as well as cattle. Caspian's strength would let them accomplish in days what normally took weeks. Vesper's knowledge of the land and her skill with animals would guide them both. "There's something else," Caspian said as the first stars appeared overhead. "Something I need to tell you about my mother's people." "What's that?" "The Nunu he made for life," he said seriously. "When we choose someone, when we give our hearts completely, it's forever. There's no changing our minds, no falling out of love, no walking away." Vesper felt her heart skip a beat. "Are you asking me to marry you, Caspian Ironwood?" "I'm asking you to be my mate in every sense of the word," he replied. "To bind your life to mine so completely that nothing can separate us.
About time.
Not distance, not death itself." She looked up into his green eyes, those remarkable eyes that had captured her heart from the first moment she'd seen him hanging in that tree. In their depths, she saw her entire future joy and sorrow, laughter and tears, a love that would weather any storm and grow stronger with each passing year. "Yes," she whispered. Yes to all of it. 1 year later, the wedding of Vesper Nightingale in Caspian Ironwood became the most talked about event in Thornwick Valley's history. Not because of the groom's extraordinary size, though. That was certainly remarkable, but because of the pure joy that radiated from both bride and groom. Vesper had insisted on holding the ceremony outdoors, beneath the very oak tree where she'd first found Caspian. Symbolism wasn't lost on anyone, where their story began with him hanging helpless. It would continue with both of them standing strong together. The entire town turned out, drawn by curiosity, but staying because of the obvious love between the couple. Even the few remaining skeptics found their hearts softened by the sight of the gentle giant carefully adjusting Vesper's wildflower crown, his massive hands trembling slightly with emotion. "Do you, Caspian Ironwood, take this woman to be your wife?" asked Preacher Morrison, a kindly man who'd spent considerable time getting to know the unusual couple. "I do," Caspian replied, his deep voice carrying clearly across the gathering. "With all my heart, all my strength, and all my days." "And do you, Vesper Nightingale, take this man to be your husband?" Vesper looked up into Caspian's green eyes, remembering that first morning when she'd seen past his size to the gentle soul beneath. "I do," she said firmly. In this life and whatever comes after, the kiss that sealed their union was gentle yet passionate, a promise of all the love-filled days ahead. When they broke apart, Caspian swept Vesper into his arms, as if she weighed nothing at all, spinning her around while she laughed with pure delight. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night. Caspian, who had once been viewed with suspicion and fear, found himself surrounded by well-wishers. Children climbed on his broad shoulders while he told them stories of mountain spirits and ancient magic. Their parents, seeing his infinite patience and gentle nature, began to understand what Vesper had seen from the beginning. "You were right about him," admitted Martha Hendricks, the town's biggest gossip. "He's nothing like what we expected." "Exactly what I expected," Vesper replied, watching as Caspian carefully helped old Mrs. Patterson to a chair, his massive strength employed in service of kindness. "He's the man I fell in love with." As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Vesper and Caspian found themselves alone beneath the stars. Their new home expanded to accommodate Caspian's size stood ready for them, but for now, they were content to sit in the place where their love had begun. "Any regrets?" Caspian asked, his arm around his new wife. "Only one," Vesper replied seriously. His face fell. "What's that?" "I regret that it took you so long to find your way to that tree," she said with a mischievous smile. "Could have had even more time together." Caspian laughed, the sound rich and warm in the night air. "Well, we have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." "The rest of our lives and then some," Vesper agreed, remembering his words about the Nunahi mating for life. "Forever and a day beyond that." 3 years passed like a beautiful dream. The Ironwood Ranch, as it came to be known, prospered beyond anyone's expectations. Caspian's incredible strength allowed them to accomplish feats that seemed impossible, building barns in days instead of months, moving boulders to create perfect pastures, and handling the most difficult horses with gentle patience. But it was their partnership that truly made the ranch special. Vesper's keen eye for business and deep knowledge of the land combined perfectly with Caspian's physical abilities and his inherited connection to the natural world. He could predict weather changes days in advance, sense when animals were sick before symptoms appeared, communicate with the wildlife in ways that seemed almost magical. "The mares are restless," Caspian observed one morning, watching their prized breeding stock pace in the far pasture. "Something's got them spooked." Vesper shaded her eyes and studied the horses. To her they looked normal, but she'd learned to trust Caspian's supernatural senses completely. "What do you think it is?" "Storm coming," he said with certainty. 1. We need to get all the animals to shelter before nightfall. Sure enough, by evening, the sky had turned an ominous green-black, and winds howled across the valley with frightening intensity. But every animal on the Ironwood Ranch was safe and secure, protected by structures that could withstand almost anything nature threw at them as they sat by their fireplace that night. Listening to the storm rage outside, Vesper placed Caspian's massive hand on her still flat belly. "We're going to need to expand the house again," she said quietly. It took him a moment to understand. When he did, his green eyes went wide with wonder and terror in equal measure. Are you? Are we? We're having a baby, Vesper confirmed, her voice full of joy and anticipation. Caspian stared at her for a long moment, then carefully gathered her into his arms, as if she were made of spun glass. A baby, he whispered against her hair. Baby, are you happy? She asked, though she could see the answer in his face. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, he said, pulling back to look at her. But I'm also terrified. What if the child inherits my differences? What if they're too large, too strong? What if they can never fit in anywhere, just like me? Then we'll love them exactly as they are, Vesper said firmly, just like I love you exactly as you are. And we'll teach them that being different isn't a curse, it's a gift. What if people fear them? Then people will have to learn that fear and ignorance are choices, she replied. Our child will know they're loved, they're wanted, and they belong here with us. The baby was born on a crisp autumn morning, arriving with surprisingly little fuss for such a momentous event. When Caspian first held his son it was indeed a boy tear streamed down his rugged face. The child was larger than normal, but not impossibly so. His grip was strong, his eyes were the same remarkable green as his father's, and when he looked up at Caspian, something passed between them that was older than words. He's perfect, Vesper breathed, exhausted but radiant. Ice Caspian replied, his voice thick with emotion. He's actually ours. They named him Ridge, after the mountain peaks that had shaped both their destinies. As he grew, it became clear that he had inherited some of his father's abilities and usual strength for his age, keen senses, and an almost mystical connection to animals and growing things. But more importantly, he inherited his parents' capacity for love. Ridge Ironwood grew up knowing he was cherished, not despite his differences, but because of them. He learned that strength should protect the weak, that kindness was more powerful than force, that true love could overcome any obstacle. On Ridge's 5th birthday, as the family celebrated under the old oak tree that had brought his parents, together, Vesper leaned against Caspian's broad shoulder and marveled at how perfectly their life had unfolded. Do you ever miss it? She asked quietly. The wandering, the freedom of the road? Caspian looked down at his wife, then at their son, who was carefully feeding sugar cubes to his favorite pony. I spent years searching for home, he said. How could I miss something that was never as good as what I found? Even when people still stare? Even when some folks cross the street to avoid us? Let them stare, Caspian replied, echoing her words from years ago. Let them cross streets and whisper behind their hands. You can't touch what we have here, as if to prove his. Point Ridge came running over, his arms full of wildflowers he'd picked for his mother. Mama, look. Flowers told me they wanted to live in your hair. Vesper laughed, accepting the slightly crushed bouquet with all the grace of a queen receiving roses. Did they really say that? Well, Ridge said seriously, they didn't use words, but I could feel what they meant. Caspian ruffled his son's dark hair, so like his own. That's the mountain blood talking, little man. Your grandmother's people always could speak with growing things. Will you tell me about her again? Ridge asked, settling cross-legged at his father's feet, and so? As the sun set behind the mountains and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Caspian told the old stories once more. Stories of the Nunnehe and their ancient magic of love that transcended differences, of finding home in the most unexpected places. Vesper listened, her heart full to overflowing, knowing that they were creating new stories with each passing day. Stories their children and grandchildren would tell around their own fires. Stories of a love so strong it had transformed not just the hearts, but an entire community. When the stars came out and Ridge finally fell asleep against his father's broad chest, Caspian carefully carried him inside. Vesper followed, pausing to look back at the old oak tree one last time. Thank you, she whispered to the night wind, to the mountains, to whatever force had brought them together. Thank you for giving me my giant. Inside their warm, welcoming home, Caspian was tucking Ridge into his specially reinforced bed built extra sturdy to accommodate a child with supernatural strength. When he emerged from the boys' room, he found Vesper waiting for him. Her eyes shining with the same love that had captured his heart that very first day. "Come to bed, husband," she said softly. "Tomorrow we start another day of our forever. Forever and a day beyond that," Caspian replied, taking her hand and marveling, as he did every night, at how perfectly her small fingers fit between his massive ones. They had found their happily ever after not in spite of their differences, but because of them. In a world that often feared what it didn't understand, they had created a sanctuary of acceptance and love. And their story, the tale of the cowgirl who found a giant hanging from a tree and chose to see the man instead of the monster, would be told in Thornwick Valley for generations to come as they settled into bed together. Vesper curled against Caspian's side like she belonged there, which she did. Completely and utterly she reflected on how much their lives had changed since that fateful morning. "I love you, Caspian Ironwood," she murmured against his chest. "And I love you, Vesper Ironwood," he replied, his arms tightening around her. From that moment in the tree until the end of time itself. Outside, the wind whispered through the leaves of the old oak, carrying their love story across the valley and into legend. And in their bed, surrounded by the life they'd built together, Vesper and Caspian drifted off to sleep, secure in the knowledge that their love was as eternal as the mountains themselves. Their wild love story was complete, but their life together was just beginning a love that would echo through the generations. Proof that sometimes the most unlikely romances create the most beautiful endings of all.